Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, October 30th, 2019. Halloween Eve, I guess, is what we'll call it tonight. I don't know if we've ever come up with a formal title for that, but here we go. Getting towards the end of October, which is pretty amazing. I'm reminded along the way, by the way, that I guess October 31st, tomorrow, there's in addition to the holiday, Halloween, all the kids are very excited. We have, I think this was the deadline for getting their act together on Brexit, wasn't it? Like that October 31st was the day they had to have everything hammered together. I no longer remember. Things were always confusing. I no longer remember exactly what happens if they haven't got their act together. I just never looked because, I mean, you know, they're not going to get their act together. So what are you going to do? All right, just sort of thought that might be an interesting thing to keep an eye on, since I did see tweeted yesterday from who tweeted this one? Madeline Peltz. Madeline Peltz. I don't know why she was keeping track of this, but she was, and let us know that 3 weeks ago, Katie Hopkins, let's say controversial Nazi figure over in the UK, an alt-right figure, if you're somehow squeamish about labeling her as a Nazi. 3 weeks ago, Katie Hopkins said she'd drink a pot of tea naked, which I'm not certain she's never done before. Drink a pot of tea naked with Nigel Farage's face on each nipple. I don't really know how she meant that. If the UK wasn't out by October 31st. So Madeline's been keeping track of this one. She, I guess, enjoyed it when somebody she didn't like very much made a foolish bet that was likely to embarrass or humiliate them, and wanted to keep track of it, and did, and just saying that time is coming. I saw a lot of people vomiting at the prospect. I am not sure what she means by drink. I mean, here's a screen cap of her Facebook promise, I suppose. If I am proved wrong, I will drink a pot of tea naked in the Apprentice Losers Cafe. I don't even know exactly what that means. With Farage's face on each nipple, which I assume she meant a paper cutout of Farage's face covering up her most sensitive areas, I suppose, that would be then exposed to, I don't know whether it's exposure to the camera or, like I said, you know, just a cold and biting wind. I'm not certain what she's afraid of there. I'm guessing she meant paper cutout. I'm not certain that Nigel Farage took it the same way, and he may be thinking he's, you know, in for either a treat or a torture, depending. I'm not certain where he falls on that spectrum with regard to Katie Hopkins, but just thought I'd keep you up to date on that one. It's unlikely, as closely as Greg Dworkin has been following the Brexit controversies and sagas. I don't know if he was up to date on that one, or whether he had received the message and was unwilling to tell you about it. I'm not saying that he's losing his nerve as a reporter. I'm just saying that might not have been on his radar. But it was on mine because it was stupid sounding, foolish, and absurd. And I like to start the day that way if I can. Speaking of which, Daily Co's Radio is now live. We are warned or advised, depending on your outlook, by Bill in Portland, Maine, who says, as Infrastructure Week continues, and it's always Infrastructure Week, Kagro X, me, discusses the seasonal pros and cons and cost differentials of hot asphalt MC cold mix. What are we talking about? And UPM on urban and rural road services in key regions and municipalities. That sounds almost absurd enough to actually do for the rest of the day. So we'll put that on hold for a moment, though, and bring Greg Dworkin, who, I don't know, maybe he's jumped to it and has already taken care of this. Whatever it means, it sounds good to me. Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm ignoring Katie Hopkins as best as I can.
Well, now you have extra reason to, I think.
I suppose. But there is a lot
like tea.
Going on Brexit-wise.
Yes.
So that's all good. I'm actually going to give you this particular piece from the New York Times, and my Twitter friend Ian Dunt, who covers British politics for us, for all of us,
Kirsten's brother,
actually has complimented the New York Times and said, it's much better sober coverage of what's really going on than a lot of the stuff he reads in the British papers.
Ah, okay. I thought it's better to read it sober, after all. So, okay.
After all. Britain to hold election in December, opening new phase in Brexit Odyssey. The vote throws back to the British people the bedeviling issue of how or even if their country should leave the European Union. Mm-hmm. So Ian Dunt's perspective was interesting. What was happening is that with successive votes in the Commons, under the watchful eye, of course, of Speaker Bercow, what was happening is that Johnson was inching closer and closer and closer to getting Commons to vote on his plan, which was a mild tweak of the old Theresa May plan that had been rejected. Mm-hmm. And he won on a principle vote. He lost on a procedure vote. You can't have the principle without the procedure, and so you had to redo it. And but each time the vote came, he got closer and closer and closer to actually passing it. And he basically gave up and said, "This is frustrating. I can't stand this. Let's have an election."
All right.
And he could have had his vote and then had the election where he would have won resoundingly. Instead, he's going to call for an election, did call for an election. It will be on December 12th because the parties agreed, 438 to 20 in Parliament. So there will be an election on December 12th. It's a short run-up. The campaign is much shorter than what we're used to in the United States.
15 minutes.
And the Conservatives are in a reasonable position to win, but then again, so are the Remainers. Mm-hmm. Now, Labour is pretty much despised by everybody these days, and that's kind of a tough position. And Labour itself is split between the Remainers and the Leave, but with a plan. And it's the Lib Dems who are the strongest Remainers, but the coalition of Remainers is equal in size to the coalition of the Leavers. And so what happens when a vote actually comes at this particular point in time after Boris Johnson has lost most of the votes that he's tried to put forward in Commons is unclear. The way Ian Dunt writes it up says there's a geographical split in the Remain vote, which is to its advantage. Opposition parties have multiple coalition opportunities open to them, while Boris Johnson has none. It can be won, this election, a minority Labour government relying on Lib Dem and SNP, that's the Scottish National Party support, is a perfectly likely outcome, and that outcome leads to a second referendum. There are no guarantees. This will be the most uphill-fraught, emotional, grueling political battle many Remainers will have ever faced. But now they have a chance, and they have been saved from the relentless and increasingly inevitable crunching momentum towards the deal passing, which is what I was talking about. It's a good day, full of risk, but also full of potential. And more importantly, there were no other avenues open. This is the only one. The fight is now on. For many of the people involved, it'll be the most important one of their lives. So that's how Ian Dunt writes it up. And that's a pretty good summary of where we're at in terms of what's going on over there.
Is that in your
looking at our triad of Trumpy people in Israel, nothing new other than it's Benny Gantz's turn to try to form a government. And his latest, people are reporting, is that he would agree to a unity government with Bibi Netanyahu's Likud party, so long as Netanyahu goes second in the rotation of who gets to be prime minister. They've done this before, where they rotate prime ministers. But him going second, Bibi going second, means that he's likely to be indicted before it's his turn, and therefore he goes to jail, so they can't accept that. So it's interesting to see what happens. But that puts Blue and White and Benny Gantz's party on the high moral ground of, yes, we're all for a unity government, which obviously is what everybody wants because nobody wants a third election. And it's only Netanyahu that's holding it up. So Likud, you better get rid of him. And that's really the pressure that's going on right now. And we'll see how that plays out over the next month. So those are our two Trumpy-type people. Johnson's going to get what he wants, but it may not be what he wants. And Netanyahu may get what he wants, and it may not be what he wants. So we'll have to see.
Okay.
Our own Trumpy person, Donald Trump,
he's the Trumpiest.
is also going to get what he wants.
In what respect?
Well, as you know, the House is going to have a Rules Committee meeting today, and then tomorrow they're going to vote on the rules of impeachment.
Yes.
And all along, which is to say over the last couple of hours, Donald Trump has said, you know what, I'm sick and tired of these fights over process. And that means, of course, we said this many times, in politics, if you're fighting on process, you're losing. And the Republicans were fighting on process, and they were losing. Everybody knew that as soon as they were done with their behind closed doors interviews, which Benghazi did, which Lindsey Graham managed under the Clinton impeachment, it's the standard way to do things. And as Trey Gowdy famously said, I can get more information on a 5-hour private deposition than I can from a 5-minute, go on TV for the sake of your constituents babbling. So they're moving to the public phase, which is coming quite soon, and realizing that they're losing the process argument. Trump says, no, I don't want my fellow Republicans to go further on process. I want to fight on the substance.
Okay.
Now he may get what he wants, and he may not like what he wants because the substance is pretty bad. Pretty bad.
Yes. Might not like what he wants.
Yesterday's big testimony, of course, was from Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. And what happened there, Democrats described the testimony of Vindman and others as crucial in the abuse of office case.
All right.
Okay.
That's
and remember,
the case.
Heidi Presswiller was reporting that what the Democrats are going to do is just do the ABCs of impeachment.
Yes, I saw
which
you
is
retweet
abuse of office, betrayal,
B.
and corruption. And so that's going to be the impeachment charge.
All right.
And that's pretty simple. It almost fits on a bumper sticker. So Democrats describe the testimony of Vindman and others as crucial to the abuse of office case. I think the big picture here is we've talked to a lot of people who are firsthand direct participants in various aspects of the story. And with every new witness, it becomes harder to deny the facts. And it's become more embarrassing to the president's conduct because it reaffirms the central details of a quid pro quo, said Tom Malinowski, Democrat New Jersey Intelligence Committee member. And, of course, what happened is that the Trumpies tried to attack him in a fairly uncoordinated way. Sounds like something that Jared would come up with. The night before he was to testify, in the morning of, they started attacking his patriotism. And that completely floundered in just a matter of hours. People like Liz Cheney, Joni Ernst, John Thune, Mitch McConnell, Mitt Romney all said you can't really attack Vindman's patriotism. That you can't. And so they actually had to drop that line, which was really kind of interesting.
Yes. Well, I mean, he came to his deposition in uniform. That was helpful as well.
They started attacking that until somebody reminded them that that's what Arlene North did.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, how'd that work out for him?
But the point is, you dress up when you go to the prom. Mm-hmm. So you wear your suit. And in this case, this is a military suit.
All right. Well, we'll see whether he ends up as head of the NRA.
Yeah, we shall see. But the point is, you can't really attack him. It's not working. It just goes against core GOP brand. And they were just not having any of it. The military is sacrosanct, and you can't do that because half their voters think that way.
Yes.
And, look at the troll poses on Twitter, right? When a Russian troll wants to come and give you a hard time about politics, they always pose as either an NRA member or an ex-military person.
Yes. Well, yeah, depending on how they're trolling you. But if they're trolling you from the right, that's what they're doing.
What I'm saying is it's a standard trope.
Yes.
And the reason it is because it is so core GOP. They can't do it. They can't pull it off.
Yes, I'm not certain
why that
lasted
about 12 hours
happened.
And they dropped it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they thought they were preserving something like a record of support for the military, which isn't actually their record, but okay, they think so. Mike Pence was out there again today. I saw it just tweeted. I guess the Hill covering him must have been at a military base somewhere, declaring Donald Trump the best friend the military ever had.
Right, he has to. He's getting. In other words, everybody's trying to walk it back. Even Sean Duffy and John Yoo were trying to walk back their comments, which of course is too late. I don't think Laura Ingraham did, but she's horrible. As a matter of fact, it was funny. Aaron Blake from the Washington Post tweeted a image from Breitbart. Thank goodness, not the link. And
okay.
The headline at Breitbart says, NSC official Alex Vindman testifies in full military uniform despite not wearing one to work every day. And Aaron Blake took a screenshot of that, retweeted it, and said, imagine it being your job to write garbage like this.
Yeah, really. Wow, okay. Despite not wearing one to work every day. Well, okay. He had a different assignment, and then he wasn't on that assignment that day. He was back as a military officer that day, so okay.
Right.
Well,
so meanwhile, the New York
how it
Times
goes.
version of what happened, I have on the list I sent you, firsthand
I
account
did
of
not see
Trump's
the list.
Ukraine call puts GOP in bind, emboldens Democrats. And what's interesting about this, it's by now you've heard the accounts of Vindman basically corroborating the fact that the transcript wasn't a transcript and certain key things were left out, including mention of Burisma. Trump said, there's no mention of Burisma. That's because when you edited the transcript, you removed it.
Yeah, that's weird how they did that. Okay, well, that was some solid stuff in the testimony, too. I don't see your list for some reason. It's missing
the Skype list, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's not there today.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just tell you about it then.
Okay.
And, you'll see
Send
it
them
at
later.
some point.
Okay. I'll need to send those to Scott at some point. But okay, I'll listen politely for the moment.
Yeah, and I can repeat it and send it via DM later if for some reason you can't see them.
Yeah.
But
Skype
there are not that many of them.
It's
A lot
Skype's
of it
fault.
is taken directly from the pundit roundup. And
okay.
in this piece
Start there.
from the Washington
Stop that
Post
open.
on the first-hand account, Democrats describe the testimony of Vindman and others as crucial in abuse of office. I think the big picture we talked about with Tom Malinowski is direct participants. So don't forget, one of the big talking points from the Republicans is it's all hearsay, except Vindman was on the call. The call is coming from the House.
Right. That's that's one of the ways to defeat the hearsay objection.
Right. And as Andrew Kaczynski writes, Vindman testified that the July call transcript omitted references to Burisma and additional mentions of Biden, and he tried unsuccessfully to have them restored. And as David Frum in retweeting that comments, if it omits things, it's not really a transcript.
No, it's not. I mean, that's a huge problem all by itself. It's more obstruction of justice charges, possibly. And that's pretty amazing. I wonder what he did to try to restore them. I don't imagine his power to restore things to that transcript.
Well, no, that's part of the process. When you have people listening, a transcript generally circulates and everybody makes their edits.
I see.
To make sure that
beforehand.
when the official version is done, it's like doing minutes to a meeting. Everybody sees them, and if there's amendments to the minutes, you do that at the next meeting.
Yeah, I see. So before the inquiry started, or immediately following the call, you get a chance.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Trying to restore it now, you versus the president? Okay.
Yeah, no,
Probably
now is not time to do that.
Okay.
Okay. And while all of this is going on, just to give you an idea how swampy everything is.
Damning interesting. Yes.
All right. There's a story in the New York Times. Former GOP lawmaker pressed for ambassador's ouster, diplomat will say. Robert Livingston. Remember Robert Livingston, the disgraced
very sexy guy.
House leader? He was a Republican. The former congressman turned lobbyist repeatedly contacted a White House official to criticize Marie Yovanovitch.
Yeah. I thought that was odd.
Robert Livingston works for OAN.
Yes. Okay.
The broadcast propaganda network.
Oh, aren't they nuts?
One America. All right.
Oh, okay.
And so he characterized Ambassador Yovanovitch as an Obama holdover associated with George Soros.
Okay, Nazi.
Yeah, pretty much. So you have somebody who was once, at least for a brief period of time, Republican leader. Was he speaker?
I don't believe he ever assumed the speaker's
leader.
office. Yes.
And, just about the highest position outside of being president that you can get to. The Speaker of the House is like third in line,
Yes, he never quite made it, but
second in line after the vice president.
Right.
And he was nominated and didn't get there.
Yes, he was nominated after the other Trump, Gingrich was booted, and he was the next logical replacement, except stepping up to the plate, he realized that I'm going to be caught and outed for my own sexual improprieties, and Gingrich having left on account of those.
Was his a phony book deal, or was it an affair? I can't remember.
His was an affair. He may also have had a phony book deal, but I don't think there was anybody buying the Robert Livingston book at that point.
Right. It was long enough ago, so I can't remember all of this. But I do know he was a crook and a cad and a bounder. And so what does he do? So he goes working for OAN and starts doing these Jewish smears.
Yeah, that seems weird.
I mean, it's pretty amazing. And you know, what I'm trying to say is that this whole thing about draining the swamp, this guy is the swamp. You can't get any more swampy than this guy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, know yourself by knowing your enemies.
Yeah.
And this guy is bad. And here he is trying to push the ambassador on behalf of who? I mean, who is paying him to do this?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, although there was something of an answer in there. But we're not certain whether that's the ultimate origin of the money or not. Yulia Tymoshenko made an appearance in that piece, and she was, or rather, Livingston claims that he was lobbying on her behalf, which was interesting too. Which because she's got her own story to tell about the situation about Dmitry Firtash in particular, about how she has the manual from the wrong side on how to get a Ukrainian government to falsely and corruptly accuse an enemy political figure with corruption, particularly in the natural gas markets, and get them in trouble, arrested, jailed, etc., using Dmitry Firtash's money. She was
and Livingston's own group has repeatedly represented Ukrainian figures as lobbying. He's registered under the Foreign Agents Registration Act is.
Yes.
So that's open information. And, it's incredible.
At least he registered.
Ms. Croft is one of two witnesses. The House committees leading the inaugural summit today. Both served as advisors to Kurt Volker. The other is Christopher Anderson, who preceded Ms. Croft as Mr. Volker's advisor. As somebody pointed out, there's just way too many Christopher Andersons in public to keep them all straight, which one's which.
Hans Christopher Anderson.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is that we're coming to the close of the behind doors testimony, and basically everybody's saying, look, there was an incredible amount of pressure going on to make the Ukrainians do what Trump wanted them to do, and Vindman directly links it to Trump with his listening in on the phone call and saying, no, Trump actually mentioned Burisma. So you can't say, well, Trump never mentioned Biden or Burisma, well, because whatever was mentioned was removed. And it's unclear whether some of the other ellipses are mentioning of things like the more information about the 2016 election and how Russia was not really behind it. It was all Ukraine. Now, there's some reports in the New York Times that House staffers don't think that these transcript lapses are all that significant, given that everything else they already know. But it just ties everything together and moves it beyond hearsay, and that's important. So let me summarize this segment here by a Jonathan Bernstein piece, which I think is really fascinating. He wrote it today in Bloomberg, and it's called "Impeachment Isn't Just About Ukraine. Congress will consider the president's action in a larger political context, and that should worry him." And what Bernstein is making the point is we all know that impeachment isn't a trial. You don't have to prove things that you broke a law. Mm-hmm. It's high crimes and misdemeanors as defined by the Constitution, which itself says that that's up to the House to define.
Yes.
Okay, so there's two episodes on Tuesday, that's yesterday, show why this larger political context represents a threat to Trump's presidency. The first was easy. According to testimony from a first-hand witness, that is to say everybody could see it coming, the published White House summary of a call between Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky, in which Trump pressed his counterpart to dig up dirt on Joe Biden, was incomplete and excluded damaging evidence. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, staffer at the National Security Council, testified, in his uniform, by the way, that when he attempted to correct the summary, his efforts were rejected. This comes weeks after Trump claimed that the summary was an exact word-for-word transcript of the conversation. What's so bad about this isn't new evidence of malfeasance. It's the message it sends to Trump's would-be allies, that his explanations may not only be untrue, but they're easily exposed as untrue. Trump might not care if he has a reputation for dishonesty, but almost all politicians do care very much about building trust among their colleagues and constituents. Remember, the smoking gun tape that finally ended Richard Nixon's presidency wasn't the first conclusive proof against him. Remember Howard Baker wears a smoking gun? You're sitting on a pile of evidence. Well, you have to make it so clear even I can't deny it. Well, okay, here. Oh, my gosh. What else do they have? That's the point. What else do they have? The reason it brought him down was it finally convinced congressional Republicans, writes Bernstein, that he'd keep lying to them and expecting them to lie for him, and that they'd keep getting exposed. They were right about this, by the way. It turned out that there were plenty of bombshells that didn't go public until years later, but that a full impeachment trial would have brought to light in 1974. Mm-hmm. And the second episode, seemingly having nothing to do with impeachment, the White House is mulling a scheme to evade the normal rules for appointing cabinet secretaries to install an acting Homeland Security secretary whom the Senate would otherwise almost certainly block. Remember, he needs a Stephen Miller person at Homeland Security to do his will. Even Christian Nielsen had to resign because she couldn't stand doing the illegal stuff forever. Right? So he wants a Stephen Miller type there who will just do his bidding. This is a mistake on multiple levels, writes Bernstein. It's hard to exaggerate how foolish it would be to antagonize Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell right now, for one thing. Other Republicans will see that the president doesn't really understand his alliance with them, can't be trusted, and even if Trump ends up choosing someone the senators could accept, it's still a poke in the eye. He's taking away an important power that gives him considerable influence over the executive branch at a time that he really can't afford to do this. So this is part of the political context. You're ticking off your Republican allies, and at the same time, you're telling them that I really did it, and it's all going to get exposed, and if you back me too much, you're out on that limb with me, so good luck.
Yeah. P.S. Get out on that limb or I'll have you shot.
Well, that's a problem for him, and so that's why what happens in the Senate is unclear.
Okay, back in 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're working out our behind-the-scenes production kinks here, and I can finally get a look at some of what's on Greg's list. But like you said, most of it is in the abbreviated pundit roundup, and we usually cull it from there anyway. But it's always nice to be able to follow along in the reading because
Mondays and Wednesdays are my easiest radio days because basically I've already done the pundit stuff. So
okay, well. Then all right, well, we'll accept that and move on to the rest. All right, what else have you got? What's up next? Are we caught up on the list yet? Or are we still
one last one here?
Okay.
It's David Frum talking about if a Mudstang is not transcript.
Vacuumed up your list. Okay.
Big picture. Numerous long-serving government professionals have stepped forth to declare that Trump's interests and those of the United States have vastly diverged, and that Trump and his ringleaders have perverted and manipulated our foreign policy to serve his interests and not ours. That is Greg Sargent's summary of what Vinland was really saying.
Okay.
And Dave Rothkopf actually has some follow-up to that. And, what he says...
what he says.
The position of a lot of Republicans is that it's fine to have a president who's credibly accused of rape and sexual abuse and tax fraud, who's a racist, who has serially obstructed justice, who's violated his oath of office, who's attacked immigrants. Well, you get it.
Yeah.
So they overlook a lot, but as Jonathan Bernstein was pointing out, not if it makes them look bad. They don't care if it makes Trump look bad, but they don't want themselves looking bad. And so that's why when it gets to be, you turn up the heat, they back off. I mean, when you lose Liz Cheney, you know you've made a big error.
I guess so. Yeah, although to be honest, I would like to lose Liz Cheney. If it is possible,
that would be
I like
fun.
the instructions.
That would be fun.
Okay.
So Philip Bump continues with this theme here, the fundamentally un-American attacks on Alexander Vindman, the idea of dual loyalty. And you have to remember, Vindman is Jewish. So bringing up dual loyalty with a Jewish patriot is really, really bad. That is like terrible. It's an ancient anti-Semitic trope, and that's all part and parcel of this. This idea of dual loyalty is something that Trump himself has raised, said Philip Bump, during his attacks on a group of Democratic lawmakers this summer for purportedly being anti-Semitic. Trump suggested that American Jews who support Democrats are being disloyal to Israel. He'd made similar comments in the past. That's, of course, important to him because he sees himself as the king of Israel, but I'm not sure that's true after this last election happened and Netanyahu was in trouble, so we'll see. The reaction to Vindman, writes Bump, though, reveals a fundamental hypocrisy in the Trumpian approach to immigrants. What Trump prioritizes in migrants who come to the U.S. is self-sufficiency and assimilation. He prefers migrants from Europe over Africa or the Middle East. What he wants is Alexander Vindman, until Alexander Vindman points out where the loyalties of Trump himself might be questionable.
Yes.
And that's the thing that he found so unacceptable.
Yeah, all right. Well, just wondering what he finds unacceptable at any given time.
Vindman's a fine American, except for the part that he doesn't like me and is not supporting my lies. Therefore, he's terrible.
Yeah, okay.
And just to finish up, Susan Glasser points out, forget the smear campaign. Read his testimony about Trump's shadow foreign policy with Ukraine. It's specific, powerful, damning, and firsthand.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so that's where things stand, and impeachment is moving. It's definitely moving. What's interesting when you step back and look at what's going on here, there are so many articles about what's going on with the vote and with Vindman's testimony. I must have read half a dozen or a dozen of them just preparing for the show this morning, and I'm not even sure where I read it. But they, of course, interviewed our poster girl, Abigail Spanberger, about impeachment.
Right in the middle
and she
of the road,
said to the effect of, I'm fine with it. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
And I say that because as that vote comes tomorrow, remember, it's not a vote to formalize opening an impeachment process.
No.
That's been going on for a month. What it is a vote to formalize process. And apparently they are moving to use the very similar process that happened during the Clinton impeachment, which, of course, Republicans will object to, even though they basically wrote the rules on that. So
yes. Well,
they will get a party line vote. Virtually all the Democrats are going to vote for it. Virtually all the Republicans will probably vote against it. But this is one of those situations where Nancy Pelosi being Nancy Pelosi, it doesn't come to a vote unless she is secure that she has enough votes to have it pass. Right?
Yes.
And so you see people, I think Joe Cunningham is his name, from South Carolina, freshman swing voter representative, who basically said, yeah, I'm okay. I'm doing it. I mean, the few holdouts that are left on the Democratic side who didn't come down on impeachment, I think it's going to be down to Tulsi Gabbard and Jeff Van Drew from New Jersey, who's like a complete jerk.
Oh.
Anybody who dresses like Larry Kudlow, is suspect.
If you say so, yeah, boy, okay.
Right? But Van Drew says, I don't see the point of all of this. What's going to happen is that the House will impeach, and again, I'm paraphrasing him, and then it'll go to the Senate, and the Senate will exonerate him, and then he goes up for re-election, and what's the point?
Yeah.
And the point is that when you go to trial in the Senate and publicly bring out John Bolton and all the other people who are refusing to testify now, it's going to look terrible. It's going to wound him. You don't walk away from an impeachment unscathed. You can say, well, Bill Clinton did. Well, it probably doomed Al Gore.
Oh, yes.
So, the idea that, oh, well, nothing happens if the Senate. First of all, as I was talking to you before the break, we don't know what's going to happen in the Senate. And as a matter of fact, as G. Elliott Morris tweeted the other day, the Senate is now a 50-50 proposition in terms of the Democrats taking over. Nobody's talking about this.
Yeah. That's
So
we could.
senators, what do senators care about? They care about saving their skin. What is Mitch McConnell's one priority? No, it's not judges. It's preserving the majority in the Senate so he remains majority leader.
Yes. I mean,
He cares about that way more than he cares about judges.
because it lets him do judges. That's true.
Right.
But yeah, okay.
But first things first.
Okay,
So
true,
if
yes.
the Senate becomes at risk, don't tell me you know how they're all going to vote. You don't.
That is true. Yeah, I've seen a little bit of writing on that. And I think David Neer was just the other day taking a look at whether or not in the Clinton impeachment scenario, whether anybody in the press even bothered to ask what that was going to do to the politics of the Senate, or the question of, well, of course they won't be able to convict him was actually the context, because there's a Democratic majority in the Senate. They didn't even bother to ask Democrats, how are you going to vote in all this, in the same way that they've assumed this, but they didn't make the same assumption back then. Now they all just assume Republicans won't vote that way because they're Republicans, and well, you can't be certain. These guys have been asked to, like you said, go out on a limb for Trump several times, and they've now learned the lesson that Trump saws the branch off after you walk out on it. And how many more times could it work? And if it'll cost you your career, will you continue to do it, or will you eventually push him out on a branch and cut it off?
Right. So you ask Cory Gardner, or you ask Susan Collins, or you ask Martha McSally, or Joni Ernst,
Yes.
or Tom Tillis. Okay. 5 right there. And there's others, I think, that are in the woodwork. The Mitt Romneys and even the Jerry Morans and Chuck Grassley's, if it's bad enough, could pull a Howard Baker. But their answer right now is, don't ask me because I'm a juror, and so you're not allowed to ask me. Now,
Right.
It's a dodge, but they're all saying it. And why are they all saying that? Because they don't have an answer.
Right.
They don't want to
true.
talk about it.
Yeah. Although what we should do, by the way, in the in the spirit of the way the Republicans are approaching the litigation that's going on, every time the Republicans question whether or not it is impeachment is the equivalent of a judicial proceeding for purposes, say, of releasing grand jury 6E information and insisting that it's not, you could ask them why all the senators keep dodging the questions by saying they're jurors. I just thought we should pocket that for an argument in court at some point. Thank you to the Republican senators who have been bolstering our case.
Right. Anyway, so that's what's going on. Just don't make assumptions about what's going to happen because we don't know. All this stuff that comes out is like, I didn't know this was going to come out 6 weeks ago.
Yes. Okay.
And so when we have public discussion of what these guys actually said behind closed doors, we'll see. We'll see, what that does to public opinion, which is going to be frozen until we start going public. It's already moved against Trump, but it's probably stalled right now in a holding pattern is more fair to say, until we start hearing some public information. But what's interesting is when you go into the impeachment polling and look under the hood, you see things like, I don't think you should be impeached, but I absolutely think you should cooperate. And of course, like 85% of the public says it would be wrong to do some of the things that Trump has been accused of doing, like trying to ask Ukraine to intervene to fix the 2020 election. Oh. They're just not convinced that it's been proven or that he did it. But a public hearing and Senate trial may well convince those people that, you know what, he really did do it. And then you don't have you can't just turn around and say, okay, well, then it's okay because he did it. That's not what they're saying. They're saying it's wrong. We just don't believe it. Well, once you believe it, what do you do then? And you don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. And that's another situation where you can't just say, okay, well, Trump's at 40% and it's never going to move. You don't know that either. This stuff is important, and it's important that we do that. And let's not make the mistake of saying, okay, well, I'm a pundit and I look at the data and it's always been the same and yesterday is going to be tomorrow and nothing changed. That's not true. That's not how it works. It looks solid until the dam breaks.
Okay. I'll be watching the dam.
Yep. So what's happening on the Democratic primary side? Seth Masket at 538 when interviewed 29 people. He does this frequently. in the
29?
or periodically, I should say, in the early states with Democratic activists, and finds Elizabeth Warren, increasingly popular.
Oh,
For the first
right.
time,
Sure.
a majority of the respondents actually have a candidate to back. A lot of the activists were sort of holding back and saying, I don't know. And what he writes is 15 of the 29 people who answered his latest round of interviews
Yes. That's enough
now
for
have a
viability.
candidate.
Okay. Well, time is getting short for you in Iowa, anyway.
Yeah, well, it's 15 weeks.
Right. I mean, that's tomorrow in Iowa time, I think.
Well,
they move fast or slow there. I don't
they
know.
get up early there.
Yes.
So Warren is increasingly popular
15
with
long
Democratic activists in early states. He writes, the most striking development is that 4 of the activists now back Warren, while 0 backed her in the last round. Warren is also the first female candidate who any activist in my sample is committed to support. One new Warren supporter told me it was Warren's policies that sealed the deal, adding that Warren's performance in Houston at the debate, which the activist attended, was especially influential, and others said Warren has the clearest message and the plans to back up that message. So I have a plan for that. Actually, it's resonating with the activists. We'll see what it does with everybody else.
Took long enough.
Don't forget, all the nervous Nellies are saying, oh, well, she can't win. We don't know. We don't know that she's going to be the nominee.
Right.
Biden still has significant strength, although there's lots of warning signs everywhere, of course, about him that we all know about. Here's a new one from Tyler Pager at Bloomberg.
Okay.
This also is in the pundit roundup. Joe Biden in danger of humiliating loss in Iowa, top Democrats warn. So, yeah, he's going to lose Iowa.
Well,
that's no surprise.
In humiliating fashion, apparently.
And right now, Bernie and Elizabeth Warren are tied in New Hampshire. Now, if Warren takes both, that's good for her. What if Bernie and Warren split the first 2 states? Then there's Nevada. And then there's South Carolina, where Biden is strong. If he loses 3 out of the first 4, South Carolina will be tough. People will change their mind.
True. Nevada, how's that running? Do we know? Or we got to wait for Nevada?
We got to wait for John Ralston to tell us.
Is he calling you now? All right. So, all right. We'll wait for that.
Well,
I guess
it's hard to know. Nevada's always a very tough state to polls, and there's not a lot of polling on it, so we don't really know what's going on there.
All right. I thought they were doing better these days, but okay. People are busy gambling, so.
Anyway.
Okay.
So the other side of the coin, even though Biden told reporters in Iowa last week he's working like hell to win, Democrats there say he's a lot of ground to make up. And so we're not really sure what's going on there, but people are worried about it. And let me just give you a completely different perspective also on the Democratic primary, which we don't get enough of, I think. And Jenna Johnson in the Washington Post has this really good, worthwhile, long piece about Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where an inner city group is tackling a key Democratic need, turning out black voters.
Okay.
Right? And so how many times have we said, well, Wisconsin was close, but it all came down to Waukesha County because the Milwaukee turnout really wasn't that strong, and it's Democratic, and that's, by the way, black vote.
That's why Waukesha.
We wound up losing because votes were found in the trunk of a car, or the wow counties turned out, this, that, and everything else. So what's really going on there in the inner cities? And Jenna Johnson writes, the Black Leaders Organizing for Communities, or BLOC, BLOC, had a meeting with a Democratic presidential candidate in March. And they talked about their interactions from the black activist on the ground point of view, which is just fascinating. And again, we don't hear enough of. No. Although the former congressman from El Paso, Beto, spoke passionately about wanting to wipe out systematic racism and repair the incredibly broken system of justice and opportunity in this country, the ambassadors from BLOC repeatedly cut him off and asked for evidence he spent time in neighborhoods like theirs and understands their problems.
All right.
Tamer Malone, 21, said he's a nice guy, but he's just doing the research on us now. He didn't vote in the 2016 election, and he grilled O'Rourke, asking why she should trust him when so many white politicians tell black voters all the right things while running for office and then turn their back once elected. Now, here's another one, April. Senator Cory Booker arrives for what's supposed to be a silent canvass, an opportunity for the candidate to listen as the activists knock on doors and talk with people. But he loudly talked through, often running ahead of the staffer and shouting, "This is Rick, I'm Cory, we're here with BLOC." He was like running to the next door trying to get to as many as possible. And I was saying, stop, dude, stop, said Rick Banks, Block's political director, who canvassed with Booker.
Is it curious whether there's any legal problem with it, or is it just that's the point of a silent canvass is you're silent? I don't know. I mean,
Well,
it might.
Abby's not silent.
No, that's okay. So
He was like running to the next door trying to get to as many as possible, and he was always talking. He keeps saying he's the only presidential candidate who's from the inner city, but it's usually only in terms of crime and guns, and in terms of other issues like investment in underinvested communities and being vocal about the issues affecting black communities. Other than shootings, I don't think he's led, and I don't think Kamala Harris has led. So
Well, they got a problem.
who came up big there? Who would they really love? Julian Castro.
Okay.
Although most say they doubt he has a real shot at winning the nomination, they like Warren.
Yeah.
Who Lang, one of the dudes there, met at a private gathering the senator had with organizers from across the country. Vice President Biden has not shown up, but his authorship of the 1994 crime bill, which led to sharp increases in incarcerations, has made him an unpopular figure with most of the activists. Last month, Amy Klobuchar stopped by for about 30 minutes to tout her ideas for increasing access to voting. She took a couple of questions. His member asked her about time as a prosecutor and pushed her for details on how she would help the poor rather than the middle class, which they saw her as more focused on. Her brief appearance angered several of the ambassadors, and none of the 16 listed her as their favorite candidate. That's a nice encapsulation of what happens when you go to a community and you try to make contact and bond, and you come in with your own agenda that you're going to just overwrite everything that they have. You came to talk and not to listen, and it doesn't work. And I just think it's great in terms of understanding what's going on, and then you scratch your head and say, well, I wonder why they didn't turn out.
Yeah, I guess that's problematic. Although, I mean, it is. They should probably.
No, they're all anecdotes. I get that, and there's a lot of voters.
No,
but
I'm
if
just
you're
saying
go
they
talk to the
should
activists. At
consider
least
that,
listen, for goodness sake.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be a nice thing to do. They are, however, inviting presidential candidates. And
Yes.
it's not really in their
And they're
nature
going.
to do that. Yeah, and they're going, and they're being asked to
But if
adhere
you
to
go,
this agenda.
then you're
and
playing by their rules.
You
If
think.
you've accepted the invitation,
Nowhere else.
you are playing by their rules. At least be cognizant of that.
You
That's
should
on
be.
staff
That's
as
a
much
nice
as the
person's
candidates,
thing
but
to
still.
do. That's what a nice person would do. But people with agendas, particularly presidential agendas, tend not to pay a great deal of attention to other people's agendas. They will probably find a candidate or two who is sympathetic to it, but the trick is there anybody who can turn that on and off, who can show up and be a listener and then go back out there and be the kind of advocate you need to be for yourself if you have a realistic shot at becoming president. It's a rare
I
thing.
feel your pain.
Yeah, I mean, people
Remember
have
that?
done it. That guy did it, as a matter of
That
fact.
guy did it.
Yeah,
And
you have to
Obama
be
did
kind of
it.
a master politician. Well, that's okay. I mean, there's no reason why there shouldn't be somebody out there auditioning the presidential candidates for master politician status. Why not them?
It's interesting that the two people that listen the
I'm just
most
sad they're
there are
frustrated
Castro
all
and
the
Warren.
time.
I'm just saying. I'm
Yeah.
putting that out there.
That's nice.
That's
They
pluses
did-
for their campaign and their chances.
They did the best at it, and and then it's up to the rest of us to decide whether or not these people who are auditioning as master politicians are acceptable to us, and whether we'll join in coalition with these folks in their assessment. We'll see. That like I said, it's a totally legit thing. Obviously, no one can tell them that it's not. So I don't know why I even bring that up. But I feel bad that it falls to the Black Leaders Coalition group here to be the one that has the frustrating job of having to evaluate presidential candidates for their humility.
Well, they
that's rough
tend
going.
to ask the hard questions.
Yeah,
And the nice
well.
thing is that they're not going to fall for the BS.
I am sorry that they keep getting frustrated, but yeah, at least they are good BS detectors, and they're playing a necessary role even in that. Also, winning all the elections.
Right. And, if authenticity is your thing, this is a nice capsulation of who these folks really are.
Right? All right. Tough work, but, seems like the tough work always falls to them, and maybe they're used to it. Just would like to give them a break.
Yep. Anyway, mobilizing Milwaukee is important because that's how you win Wisconsin, which is how you win the presidency. So the idea that you should take them for granted,
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, especially with our Waukesha County stories. Yeah, you can bump them right out of the news if you do well enough in Milwaukee. Everyone should be reminded.
Right. Anyway,
Yes.
so I was talking about the fact that there are polls that show under the hood that Trump is in deeper trouble than it appears. James Hohmann covers one of them. This is a new poll showing why Trump's defenders are more focused on impeachment than substance. Process, that is to say, than substance. The Grinnell poll, which was run by J.N. Seltzer out of Iowa, conducted October 17th through 23rd, surveyed 1,003 adults, margin of error is plus or minus 3.1. The numbers of people who say it's wrong to seek assistance from a foreign government are remarkably consistent across ages, demographic groups, education levels, income, and party line. More than 80% of self-identified Republicans, evangelicals, and rural dwellers say it's not okay for a president to ask for assistance from a foreign government to help win an election. When it comes to foreign interference, having findings this close to a consensus are rare in polling these days, said Seltzer, who also conducts the gold standard Iowa poll for the Des Moines Register. The substance of the question at hand in the impeachment inquiry does not seem in dispute. What's appropriate in terms of process and consequences is far less clear.
Okay.
So they're focusing on process because the substance was terrible. The consequences are far less clear because we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So when Trump turns around and says, thank you for defending me on process, it's not what I want, forget it, and pulls the rug out from under him, they go, oh gosh, what did he do this time? How are we supposed to defend him when we try to put together something and then he says, no, I don't want that, I want this other thing over here?
Yeah, we just said that one was bad for you among our voters. All right, well.
But the flip side of that, again, is people know it's wrong.
Yes.
Just like people know it's
They
wrong
just-
to attack somebody like Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. They know it's wrong. That's not an argument you have to have. You've already won that argument. All you have to do now is show that he did it. And that's
Yes.
why the public hearing is so important, and the testimony we're hearing behind closed doors right now is important.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine the default position for them is you didn't prove it. And
Or that it's bad, but it's not impeachable.
Yes,
That's really the only
that
defense
too.
they're going to have.
Okay.
So, you have people like Mark Meadows, is really funny, who got all upset about the change of venue here because the rules that are being voted on tomorrow, again, put the Intelligence Committee first, and then when stuff is done, then it can go to Judiciary.
Yes.
And Judiciary is far more partisan and has the loudmouth bomb throwers. And Meadows says, I can't believe they're taking it away from Judiciary. We've asked all the tough questions. And you scratch your head and said, I thought you said you didn't have access to any of this and it was all being done behind closed doors, but you didn't know what was going on. How could both of those be true at the same time? And that's why you don't make process arguments.
Well, if you can't understand it, no. Huh.
Right?
All right.
And then so Devin Nunes is saying they're going to have this impeachment inquiry vote, and they gave it to us 2 days beforehand. It's 8 pages. How are we supposed to read it?
4 pages a day, man. Okay.
So it's really hard to be a congressman when you can't read.
Yeah, I guess so. Ask the cow to do it.
Right. So, you just throw up your hands and say, forget about the process stuff. Obviously, they'll find an argument anywhere, and it's not, shall we say, in good faith. And again, the public's not stupid. They get that. They see that. And so that's why it's a losing argument. And I'm fairly confident that Trump actually did some bad things that have come to light. And we'll see how the public reacts. And consequentially, because of how the public reacts, we'll see how the Senate reacts. But don't predict in advance how it's going to go.
Okay. I predict it will be great.
Now, last thing, and again, you'll see this because journalists can't help themselves. Oh, my gosh, Democrats are going to have to go on the record tomorrow about impeachment. Isn't that bad for them?
No.
Actually, no. It's really not much of a risk at all. Pelosi has the votes, and they're all, except for the fellow from New Jersey that dresses like Larry Kudlow. We're all good with that. Jeff Van Drew. And again, Tulsi Gabbard, I presume, will say no because she's weird. So for all of those reasons, the Democrats are fine. You ought to be talking about pushing Republicans to see how many of the Republicans will vote for these rules. Right? Because Republicans who vote against these rules themselves are at risk. And in fact, I think it was Politico had a story about Republicans fear a complete wipeout in 2020.
Oh.
Well, it's votes like tomorrow that make that happen, right? If Trump really deserves impeachment, how do you defend running again when, in fact, you went out on that limb that got sawed off in trying to defend him?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
Okay. I'm trying to... By the way, how does Larry Kudlow dress?
Flashy. Let's
Oh,
just say.
okay. All right. I'm just curious, like, wait a second.
Right.
Keep saying that.
The wide pinstripes and things that I can't believe you wore that on TV kind of stuff.
Huh. All right. I guess I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, check Jeff.
I will.
Google
Jeff
some
Van Drew,
Jeff
huh?
Van Drew pictures
All right.
and see how he dresses. You'll see what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
okay. I hope so. All right. Well, I'm just curious. I imagine it must be very entertaining.
I'll see if I can find one for you. And
Okay. Give me a good exemplar. And perhaps we can-
exemplar. Yeah. Anyway, he's a very natty dresser.
All right. Well, that's all right. That's a thing. You would think, yeah, like a lot of Donald Trump's friends are. Trump is kind of lousy at it, actually. I mean, which is fine because he is a more understated version of that, and that's one of the few things he's understated in. He could be covered in gold and be perfectly in character. All right. Well,
let me send you the image instead of the link.
I'll be on
There
the
we
lookout
go.
for that.
That's a typical outfit for him.
All right.
He's wearing a plaid jacket with a blue and white striped tie that looks kind of like something from a barber pole, except blue instead of red.
Yeah, I mean it's not like a clown suit necessarily.
It's not a clown suit, but when you look at him, you go, "Oh, that's Jeff Van Drew."
Yeah, all right. Well, those things do tend to stand out. Maybe that's what he wanted as his trademark, rather than being a holdout and an idiot. But I guess it only
Anyway,
makes things
that's
worse.
it. And I'll
good.
gather more Van Drew pictures for you, and we'll
Thank
get back
you.
tomorrow and we'll do it again.
Yes, all right. And we'll see what he's wearing tomorrow. We'll ask him next time. What are you wearing? Who are you wearing? All right. Thanks, Greg. Take care. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Just had a message pop up that mouse battery is very low in case you wanted to track things at home. So if at some point our sound effects don't come up, it's because our mouse battery is too low. And, all the magic is running out on my magic mouse, I guess. And I don't really have the opportunity to connect it to a USB to recharge in the middle of the show. I don't think so. Although maybe if I just kept USB cords closer at hand, I might be able to get away with it and just run things off the keyboard. But okay, we'll see what happens. Just like Donald Trump does. It's managed to get him this far. And if it earned me 3 years at the helm of the executive branch of the United States government, I think it would be well worth the risk. All right, so let's see what is up and worth reviewing today. I did see earlier when we were discussing Bob Livingston and his representation of Timoshenko, as it turns out. I'm very curious about that one. It was reported in the Wall Street Journal. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to bring you the text of that one because it's usually behind a paywall, but there is a New York Times piece on it, and I think that's the one Greg was sharing. And I don't know whether did they mention Timoshenko in the Times piece. It was only mentioned way down at the bottom of the Wall Street Journal piece, so I'm somewhat curious, and we'll see if we can scroll through. But it complicates our picture of Timoshenko somewhat, that she would have been tempted to work with Livingston, of all people. I guess she probably thought she needed to get herself some Republican representation, given the current climate of in Washington. But I'm surprised that she would land on Livingston. Livingston, not known, generally speaking, I don't think, as inside the Trump orbit. Now, it doesn't look like the New York Times mentions Timoshenko, so I suppose I should start off by seeing whether or not the Wall Street Journal will offer me their text on this one or not, or whether maybe I can I see it in the pocket version. I forget how they deal with things. No, they go straight. They're very smart, and they go straight to the what was it? Straight to the paywall thing. Now, I wonder if having displayed it on my phone and Twitter, they would let me see this thing again. I should have kept it open there so I could have read it to you. I wonder if I can find it again. I'll have to probably look at my own. Yeah, let's see. I have to look back in my own thing here. There was Rebecca Ballhouse who had did you say Ball or Ballhouse? Who had sent this thing around, and my phone let me open it up a while back, but I guess they only give you one look at it. And I usually think about this every time I open a Wall Street Journal story, that this is the case. And occasionally when it's really important, I copy the entirety of the text and email it to myself. And I guess I should have done it here. Too bad I won't be able to read it to you verbatim, but I was curious to find out that Yulia Tymoshenko had hired Livingston to try and press her case, whatever her case was. And I guess I can ask, maybe I can ask Greg. I can usually get Greg, I'll make this formal appeal to you. We're using your Wall Street Journal account for Rebecca Ballhouse's piece from today. Bolton expressed concerns about Giuliani in Ukraine, advisor to testify. This would be the Christopher Anderson story in the Wall Street Journal from today. The rough equivalent of what we learned from the New York Times, but their report includes word of what Tymoshenko is up to, or just a hint of what she was up to. So it's odd that she would conclude that she would want Bob Livingston representing her. What case she thought Livingston could make and to whom, I am not sure, but it sounded from the reading I gave the article the first time earlier today, she was interested in making the case that she had just run for president. She actually ran against Zelensky, as it happens. She was chiefly in it to run against Poroshenko, who was running for re-election as president of Ukraine. Zelensky was, I guess, the rough equivalent of a third-party candidate here in the United States, except without the stigma that goes with it. And Zelensky kind of came out of nowhere and was able to win based on his, well, ironically, his popularity on television. So she came in third, I think, in this election. And I think prior to the election, probably, it sounds like she hired Livingston to try to press the case that Poroshenko was cheating in the election, which is ironic also. And I don't know how much headway she now thinks that she's going to make in the United States with claims of cheating in the election, especially since Zelensky won. And I don't think she's making any claims that Zelensky cheated in the election. So I don't know what claiming that Poroshenko did gets you, unless you think it gets him disqualified and you come in second and then you have a plan for why Zelensky shouldn't really be president or whatever. I don't know. I'm not really sure. But like I've told you in the past, Tymoshenko would be somebody very interesting to talk to. I don't necessarily think that the impeachment inquiry panels will be the ones to talk to her, but I think newspaper reporters ought to, and I guess Rebecca Ballhouse did. She should go back and ask her, what can you tell us about Dmytro Firtash and his connections to the Ukrainian government and his prior practice with respect to targeting political enemies with smear campaigns that accuse them of corruption, particularly in the natural gas market in Ukraine, that land them on the outs or can pose the possibility, at least, of ending their political careers. I guess if you thought that that was something you could pull against someone in the United States and you were worried about Biden and you found a way to connect Biden to Ukraine, I guess the go-to play would be to say, let's talk to Dmytro Firtash about how you use the Ukrainian government, how you convince the Ukrainian government to accuse someone of corruption in Ukraine. And he's already got that playbook. He's the guy that's made it work in the past. And as we read the other day, he has reason, well, he, in his mind anyway, has reason to be a Biden hater right from the get-go. So it's a potent combination. Let's see, other names popping up in the course of the investigation. Greg mentioned Jared Kushner's name, and he's found his way into the controversy somehow as well, or at least other reporters have found a way to insert him in there. Brendan Cole in Newsweek publishing this photo of Jared Kushner dining next to Ukraine's president at diplomats' event 7 weeks before Trump's call resurfaces. This is not a new entry. This is actually from late September. For some reason, I saw it circulated on Twitter this morning. And so I thought at the very least, we should remind ourselves that there is a angle out there in this investigation that could get us to talking to Jared Kushner. No indication so far of any interest in the committees in asking him. And I'm sure that he would be one of the few who would honor the president's demand that a subpoena from the committee not be honored. And the connection is tenuous, I guess, at this point. It says just this. An image has been shared on social media of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky sitting next to White House advisor Jared Kushner at a diplomatic dinner with European leaders some 7 weeks before the controversial phone call between President Donald Trump and Zelensky that sparked impeachment proceedings. So far, Kushner's name has been far from the growing firestorm in Washington over the call, and the whistleblower's document alleging Trump pressured Zelensky into investigating former Vice President Joe Biden's son, Hunter. The picture, uploaded to photo-sharing site Flickr, shows Trump's son-in-law sitting with Zelensky to his right on June 4th, 2 weeks after the Ukrainian president's inauguration. So, by that time, the storyline had developed, and the Trump administration was already pushing, and people working outside of the administration, but on behalf of the administration, or rather on behalf of the campaign, were already pressuring Zelensky about the investigation. So I guess the big question there would be, what did you two talk about? And did the investigations or Burisma or Hunter Biden or Joe Biden or anything like it come up in your conversation? He'll say no to all of that. And I guess that's probably then would have to be the end of the inquiry until they could come up with some sort of proof that they did in fact discuss those things, if there is such proof and it's findable. Anyway, the picture's caption noted that the dinner marked the U.S. mission to the EU's annual Independence Day celebrations. It was the big party, hosted by the U.S. ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland. And I guess that makes good sense. If we hadn't seen this reported already in September, late September, a good sleuth would have been able to put together the fact that, and did we find out about that when we read about Gordon Sondland's big party? I don't know if it was mentioned that Jared Kushner was there. If it was mentioned, it certainly, I would think, didn't say that he was seated next to Zelensky. But if it had, we would all have said, I wonder if they had a chat about those things. Also present among the leaders and diplomats were U.S. Energy Secretary Rick Perry and U.S. State Department Counselor Ulrich Breckbuhl, whose name has been in a couple of articles that I've read, but I don't think we've actually read them out loud, or at least not that part on the air. So another name to add to the list, someone to watch. Ulrich Breckbuhl, by the way, according to the whistleblower, was listening in also on the phone conversation on July 25th, but just one of many, and we've heard from others who have been listening since then. So I don't know whether we're hearing from this guy or not. The image of the dinner has been widely shared on social media, with Laura Rosen, a journalist with AI Monitor, tweeting to her 145,000 followers, had noted the other night that on Ukraine-gate, Kushner and Ivanka suddenly seemed to be invisible. But I was wrong, not invisible. I don't see Ivanka in the picture. She may be on the other side of the table, for all I know. The Financial Times reported at the time that Kushner had met with Zelensky who was on his first trip to Brussels to reassure Kiev's Western backers. Kushner had gone to Brussels during Trump's controversial visit to the UK at the start of June. I guess we could look at the Financial Times report on it. Oh, it's not a link. Or at least, maybe this warning message is preventing us from clicking through. Like, all right, well, there's the Financial Times report. Can I open that? Is that, that too is firewalled. But, all right. Well, at any rate, we'll read on here in Newsweek. Kushner had gone to Brussels during Trump's controversial visit to the UK at the start of June. Remember that one. Perry had led the U.S. delegation to Zelensky's inauguration on May 20th, with the whistleblower saying that Trump had canceled sending Vice President Mike Pence, and that Trump did not want to meet the Ukrainian president until he saw how he, quote, chose to act in office. Meanwhile, there are concerns in Kiev that Ukraine could be adversely impacted by the crisis as it relies on U.S. congressional bipartisan support, we talked about that yesterday, as a buffer against the threat of Russia. Head of the Ukraine program at the Chatham House think tank, Orisa Lutsevich, has said that Kiev is caught in the crossfire, especially given that U.S. development and military aid to Ukraine remains critical and possibly even remains blocked. We don't know. Alyona Getmanchuk, director of the Kiev-based New Europe Center, told Newsweek that there is considerable uncertainty now about the relationship between Washington and Ukraine. We don't even know what the strategy of the U.S. president toward the Ukraine is right now. I want to believe that it would be support. I don't know if it would be conditional or unconditional. That is the question. It might not be support. If Putin's position isn't supportive, and it's not, then it's not very likely that Trump's is either. If it is conditional support, and one of the conditions is to help Trump be reelected, it is not a good story for us. It would be better not to get the support under those conditions. Interesting. Because again, this is from a month ago. I don't know whether this remains the same or whether the position, whether she speaks for the Ukrainian government here, or, well, she doesn't. But if they might be in agreement is another question. But a lot of people doubted, for instance, whether or not it was really possible that the aid had not, in fact, been received by Ukraine, regardless of the United States government's position officially being that the aid had been released. Why wouldn't they speak up and say, no, it hasn't. We haven't gotten it. Where is it? We need it so badly. There's no way we wouldn't speak up if it hadn't arrived. Unless, of course, as this woman asserts, if the support is considered conditional, that is, if it is the understanding of the Ukraine government that even though the money has been released, though they haven't performed, they haven't delivered the deliverable. I was looking for another word there, but I find nothing easier than deliver the deliverable. If they haven't done that, but the aid has been released, if it was with a wink and a nod, and you'll definitely do that now, right? Then you could see the aid being released. But what if the aid wasn't really released? Would Ukraine speak up if Ukrainian officials believed that the release was conditioned on the belief of the United States government that they would actually perform in delivering this deliverable, and they don't want to do that? Then I guess possibly. If it's conditional and one of the conditions is to help Trump be reelected, it's not good for us. It would be better not to get the support under those conditions. Interesting. But if the conditions would be like we used to have, to reform our armed forces or to fight corruption, that would be good because that is in Ukraine's national interests. Okay. Just thought I'd throw that out there. There's not much more about what Kushner was doing at this moment or what they talked about, but that might be of some interest to investigators. And it might be interesting from a political standpoint to request an interview or a deposition of Kushner only to have him decline and simply use that for the PR value and just say, yeah, that's what we figured you would do. And we won't even necessarily subpoena you. We're just going to let everybody know, yeah, Jared Kushner refused to cooperate again. and that might be enough. All right. Thought that was of some interest there. Let's back up and go back into Pocket. We got to get rid of some annoying stuff happening in the way here. All right, let's see. Oh, that closed my Pocket. That's not good. Got to have that open again. Let's see. I am not, and we'll see also whether we're going to be able to get Joan around here today with more testimony slated before the three committees. You never know who's going to be coming up. I think it was Christopher Anderson set for providing testimony today, and the Wall Street Journal also had news in their article, which I can't open, about who was testifying. But also Catherine Croft, who replaced Anderson in the State Department hierarchy, I think, reporting to Fiona Hill. The two of them are slated for testimony today. They don't have uniforms to show up in, but it might be of some interest, and we'll, I'm sure, get even more explosive material out of that today. We'll see whether Joan has the opportunity to come by and join us today, or perhaps whether Skype is just slowly dying and it let Greg's call come through, but then not his notes, and the next stage of its collapse is to prevent Joan from getting here. I don't know. We'll see if we can find out. All right, let's see. Other things. Oh, yes. Well, I do have the text of the bill, the resolution that will be setting the parameters for the impeachment inquiry going forward. I think it makes rather dry reading if you just read it straight up. And I haven't seen an analysis offered up yet, but maybe we can actually Google something like that now and see whether Vox or anyone else has given it a read through. All right, everyone's searching for it because it came up right away. House resolution on impeachment. We'll see whether anybody has given us a look. The Washington Post has, and we'll see who wrote that. Felicia Sonmez, John Wagner, Colby Itkowitz. We'll see what they have to say about it, whether they have an analysis of the content or just analyzing the politics of it. Democrats unveil resolution setting scope of public phase of impeachment inquiry of Trump, empowering Schiff to make key decisions. That'll, of course, please the Republicans to no end. House Democrats unveiled a resolution Tuesday afternoon to set the parameters of the public phase. They plan to vote to formalize it Thursday. The White House panned the measure, arguing that it, quote, confirms that House Democrats' impeachment has been an illegitimate sham from the start. It does not. You would not put that in such a resolution. The House Judiciary Committee responded by releasing a 3-page list of procedural safeguards. The president and Republican lawmakers continued to assail the impeachment process as House investigators heard testimony for the first time from a White House official. That would have been Vindman yesterday, the top Ukraine expert at the National Security Council, testifying that he did not think it was proper for Trump to demand that Ukraine investigate Biden, either one, Hunter or Joe, or both, and feared that doing so undermined U.S. national security. We know about what Vindman said mostly. I came here for the analysis of the rules instead. But let's see. All right, more complaining from Trump. Some also question. All right, okay, yes. So how? Oh, these are just bullet points for other stories about this. Let's see. Anything good in there? No. All right. Yeah, and then it just goes into discussion of Vindman's. All right, so no one has read through it. It's like I said, it is dry reading, and I know that, I know Brian Beutler gave it an attempt at some point because he was worried that he was worried that the subpoena power afforded to the minority might be too open-ended. I wonder if he wrote anything about it since, and we should check in on that. His concern was that it might give the minority an unlimited number of subpoenas it could issue. Of course, there would be votes held, and they could just lose each vote. But if they can propose literally, 1 million subpoenas, and it doesn't have to be 1 million, even 1,000 would be disruptive enough, and force votes on all of them, they could gum up the works just by filling up the agenda with votes that have to be taken on subpoenas that they propose. Of course, at some point, the chairman can put a stop to things and just say, well, further subpoena suggestions are just dilatory at this point, and we're just not going to entertain them. There would be a showdown, and Republicans would point to being shut out of the process, but I suppose he could answer that by saying we've had 50 votes already. But okay, let's see. I don't know whether he gets himself an answer. I'm going to scroll through his timeline and see whether he put got an answer or wrote anything stating the objection and what he had found out about it, but I don't see anything. Okay. So far, so good. Let's see. All right. Well, no word on that. And again, as I said, I think it would probably be a waste of time to read through the resolution itself, just because so much of it will read like gibberish. But it's not easy to sort out on the fly. Now, so far, just Brian worrying about these things and not coming to any particular conclusion about it. I guess I'll take one last look maybe at Crooked Media and see whether they have anything written up about it. No, I guess not. So far, so good. Okay. Joan tells me she'll be around for the last half hour or so of the show and is in on shutdown watch, which I suppose would give us a good opportunity to point out that she was one of the folks who made the earliest call about the possibility of a confluence of Trump impeachment and a shutdown. I think I saw, was Igor Volsky sort of floating that possibility yesterday. And I think Travis Rosen noticed that and said, Joan already brought that up here on Kagro in the Morning last week, if not sooner. And yes, one deserves credit for that. Two, when the way Igor said it, I wasn't 100% sure why I cared so very much. I think he was offering it up as Trump thinking it would offer a distraction from impeachment, but I just see it as compounding the problems of impeachment, that in addition to being thoroughly corrupt, he's also incompetent to simply keep the government running. And I don't think it adds to his case in any way, shape, or form to also shut down the government in the middle of all this. But he likely sees it differently and wrongly, and I think I maybe am perfectly happy to let him try and do that and roll the dice and see whether he thinks he can make it work. All right. Here's an interesting referral for us. Kate Sherrill sends us the tweet of Kate Brannon. Let's take a look at the tweet here. Kate is editorial director at Just Security, and so that's always a fun place to turn. Oh, we've got our break coming up after all, but she's got this piece. So let's just open it up and see what it's all about here. Exclusive. In a late July meeting, the Pentagon told the White House, if you don't release the Ukraine money by August 6th, and they didn't, by August 6th, we will be at risk of violating the law. The White House ignored the warning. They didn't release it by August 6th. That would presumably put them in violation of the law, something we all know about. And, of course, I still believe that there's some possibility that they haven't released it. Perhaps we can take a look at the Just Security article, if it's not all that long, after the break. But also coming up after the break at some point, Joan McCarter will be joining us. And, well, she'll get to explain herself. Not that she has to, but she'll explain what she means by being on shutdown watch. How close are we? How realistic a possibility is it? What does it mean that she's looking out for it? And what can we find on the front page later on? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Scrambling around to see if I can't charge the mouse just a little bit in between now and when Joan calls. I fear that I will need the mouse to click the button to answer her call, and it'll finally run out of power at that point. So it's charging a little bit. And then I ask you for your patience, Joan, in hitting the answer the call button. I'll have to unplug the USB. Yeah, there we go. Oh, well, too bad I didn't get that message. All right, let's see whether we can make this work. Come on, mouse, wake up. There we are. All right, it worked. Good morning, Joan. How you doing?
Good morning.
Charging my mouse during the show. The magic of the magic mouse is about to run out on me. And then I realized I've plugged the thing in, and I can't now put the mouse down on a flat surface because the cord is plugged into it, and you're calling, and I can't get the mouse flat. So, fumbling around trying to, how am I going to answer this call? Okay, well, good morning. You are on shutdown watch, you're telling me.
I'm always on shutdown watch. Every fall, every Christmas.
Yeah, basically, I guess that's true. And it starts after the end of the fiscal year. So every year you get a continuing resolution and a shutdown watch as a bonus.
Yes, so because this is how we do business now.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's what
it's really frustrating that this is the norm because, this is not the norm. This is not the way it's supposed to work. This is not the way it worked for a really long time.
Yeah. Well, not surprising that, as it turns out, when you put a businessman in the White House, business as usual doesn't actually work.
No, but
all right.
You'll remember that it happened before this.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was the favorite trick to try to extort President Obama into anything.
Yes.
Everything. To complain about the Affordable Care Act, to complain about taxes, to just because they hated him because the African-American man had the temerity to be in the White House.
How dare you?
They didn't need a good reason for a shutdown.
No, and they never got one, but they had the shutdowns nonetheless. But
yes,
that too has been. Remember, and I know I saw you joining in the chorus. Just to switch the subject a little bit, we'll end up coming right back to it. But every time the question is asked out there on Twitter and wherever else online, I don't know why people still ask the question. To what point in history do you trace the breakdown of norms in American politics? And everybody with a head on their shoulders says Newt Gingrich. I think Newt Gingrich probably was the first one to make famous the government shutdown as political football that ends up being a huge failure for a Republican Party, no matter what position they occupy in the government. For doing it for... for reasons outside of the political norms. I think most people come away, if you have political memories of the time of Gingrich shutting it down. They pinned it on him for being upset about not getting good seats on Air Force One.
Yeah.
When he traveled with Clinton to where? I forget. I'm not even sure what he was going to anymore.
I don't remember.
But some state function or another. But he didn't
get to sit up front with Bill. And yeah.
And he was angry about that. And the famous New York tabloid cover of him as a baby in a diaper stomping and throwing a tantrum. And boy, if that isn't similarly useful these days, once again, as Gingrich
and he
finds
ended
himself
up
back in the
ruining
news.
impeachment out of it.
Yeah, that's
Hopefully
right.
we can restore it as a function of government, but
one would hope. All right. Well, but yeah,
I mean, I know that there were the seeds. Certainly, I mean, Roy Cohn.
Yeah.
Was sort of and McCarthy, but.
Yes.
But of our modern day troubles, it goes to Gingrich.
Yes, of all people who are still alive who shoulder the blame for that, he's number one.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, there have been periods outside of the political norms before then. We know that's true. Historians might scold us, but
even with Iran-Contra, not with the Iraq War necessarily, but through up until the 21st century, Republican shenanigans were kind of in the realm of normalcy.
Yes.
Gingrich being the exception. But there were still the processes that Republican administrations went through, and there were still mostly the processes that Congress went through. Mm-hmm. Gingrich was the one who started breaking that down.
Yes.
Who did away with a strong committee structure.
Yeah.
That approached the legislative process with fact-finding and with a degree of parity and with seriousness.
Yeah. As an inquiry about what should actually be done here versus what is our conclusion, let's go find a committee to reach that conclusion.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, he was kind of a jerk. Oh, well, he still is.
Gingrich is mostly the problem, I think.
Yeah, and I think it was last week or so that you had that response to somebody, and it sort of struck me that he would be the sort of person you would point to and label something if you really wanted to be, catchy about it and say, almost the Antichrist of American politics, the one who led to the downfall and ultimate destruction of the American political system. And how ironic.
It.
Yeah.
He started it. It took the creative minds of Paul Ryan and particularly Mitch McConnell to see the start of that and think, oh, how much worse can we make it?
Yeah.
Particularly Mitch McConnell.
True. But yeah, the original gangster in terms of his own term for it, which, I guess he should be the one to coin the term for, but he used to bemoan it all the time when it was to his advantage as the politics of personal destruction, and that it had to, that this was his version of projection. We got to end the politics of personal destruction, which he largely invented. And I just thought it was interesting that if you agreed with the description of him as being sort of to the metaphor of the Antichrist figure, that how ironic that he would end up with his wife posted in the Vatican. That seems like a bad place for him. And I hope somebody splashes him with some water from around there and see what happens. Assuming it's all holy water in the Vatican, I don't know. Comes out of the taps, I guess.
Yeah.
It could, I mean.
If you believe that thing.
Sure, I mean, right. If you're willing to believe it, then poof, it's holy water. It's all it requires is the right person saying so.
I have a hard time believing either of them believe anything. But,
well,
that's me.
Yeah, no one knows for sure. Gingrich, it's very difficult to believe. And his wife, for that matter. I don't know. She seems to be pretty Catholic, though. So
she married him.
Yeah. Well, that's how he became.
How Catholic can you be marrying Newt Gingrich?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that was part of the deal.
His personal history.
Right. I'll get you to the Vatican. We'll clean you up. And I guess I suppose if you believe in that,
maybe this was
maybe
her
you can
plan.
Yeah.
Marry him and then get him to the Vatican and
and
have
then I
all of
can
his
get it
sins absolved.
right, and then I can remain. I don't know. Not a bad plan. Not a bad posting.
Anywho,
Yes, right.
Government shutdown.
Yes, right. Back to that.
We have 3 weeks now, less than 3 weeks. It's November 21st is the deadline.
Yeah, that's not much.
No, it's not much. And right now we're at McConnell's putting up a defense spending bill that he knows that Democrats can't vote for because Democrats have already told them that they won't vote for this because it doesn't comply with the agreement they made back in September on budget levels because it's spending too much in contrast to what he's willing to spend on domestic stuff. So
Right. Okay.
So he's putting up this bill anyway so that Democrats put it down and so that he can say, look at the Democrats getting in the way.
Right. He needs that.
So right now it's all kabuki. We have less than 2 working weeks to get this done, and McConnell is playing kabuki and not, as far as anybody can tell, even trying to get the White House to think about the fact that they need to do this.
Okay.
And enter Trump, who's not thinking about it either right now. He's thinking about impeachment.
Yes, of course. 3 weeks is, it's a short amount of time. It makes people nervous, but the reality is that I think you would agree this is about the phase in which they usually are in with 3 weeks to go. The majority leader, McConnell, knows he needs a symbolic opportunity to show that Democrats are quote unquote obstructionist, and he'll do that and then try again later, maybe. But yeah, the work on the president, that could take more than 3 weeks.
It could take more than 3 weeks.
It may never be successful.
We're going to be 3 weeks further into the impeachment process. We're going to be through public testimony.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is going to be starting up soon. So I shouldn't say through public testimony, into public testimony, because we don't know how long this phase necessarily is going to last.
That is true. And
what else would Trump do besides have a temper tantrum, either November 21st or December 21st, which was probably what they would try to extend it to with another continuing resolution.
Always go that way.
He's going to want to hunker down. He's going to want to go back to his border wall, which again will be the largest sticking point. Because that's his safe place. That's where he gets all of his chance to build the wall. That's where his people love him to be. I just, it's not a given that this will happen because Senate Republicans sure don't want another shutdown.
Yeah.
That would be disastrous for them.
I guess I wonder.
When does Donald Trump care what anybody else wants?
No, that's true. He doesn't have any sense of that being. He doesn't have any sense of what they want or any sense of it being important. So.
Or any sense of consequences.
Right. That too. He just thinks it's an automatic, that the role of a Republican Senate is to do what I say as a Republican president. Sacrifice yourselves, vote the way I tell you to, etc. That's, I'm sure, what he thinks normally happens. And very often it does happen, but it's the result of a series of negotiations between Republican White Houses and Republican senators, and I don't think he has that dialogue. He just sees the outward consequence. I used to read in the paper that Republican presidents got what they wanted from Republican senators all the time and has no sense of how they got that. So he just thinks you demand it and it shows up on your doorstep.
I think so.
Yeah.
He bullies.
Yeah.
His whole approach is to humiliate them into loving him.
It works great.
Yes. So ultimately, yes, I love that Mitch McConnell is in this position. but really am not feeling good about how this holiday season is going to play out.
Yeah,
Yay!
they might be able to get a continuing resolution to help them through the holidays, either all at once or one at a time. Like we'll get through Thanksgiving and then we'll do another one to
Well,
get
a
us through.
few actually have pushed the whole idea of let's just take Trump out of this as much as we can and do it for a full year. A full year continuing
Yeah.
resolution.
I mean, it's available as an option, I guess.
Yeah. And in fact, some Republicans have raised that, I think, because they don't want to have this fight with Trump. But that's not something House Democrats are going to go along with happily.
Yeah.
They're already pushing back against that idea.
Okay.
Speaking of House Democrats, they've passed 10 of 12 appropriations bills. So,
okay.
once again, doing the work that the Senate is not.
Yeah, well, that's the nature of the House generally, but it wasn't always the case for a Republican House because they were more conscious of Republican Senate sentiment,
Right.
which would tell them, no, that's not going to pass here, or the Democrats will obstruct it, so don't bother. But Democrats don't care what the Republicans in the Senate think about things, so they take care of the work. Okay.
So that's where we're at.
All right. Do you have any sense? Does anybody have any sense at all of any kind of what I was wondering whether? Does the well ever run dry on the wall as a reason to shut down the government? Not certainly with his supporters, but does anybody else, either Republicans on the bubble, certainly Democrats, but no indication that they will message against it to say when he threatens a shutdown and tries to blame it on wall funding, any preparation for saying, what, again, you asked for this last year and it worked out and you got your money. What do you declared an emergency, remember?
You stole the money.
Yeah, I mean, everybody remembers that. And of course, the reality is it didn't steal nearly enough to actually build the entirety of the wall, but at that point you can say you've stolen money.
Some saguaro taxes.
That's true.
Cactuses and
that's true.
Yeah.
Right, but you've stolen money 3 or 4 times now, and we still see no new wall being built, just cactuses being destroyed, old fencing being replaced by new fencing that apparently can be climbed by
8-year-olds.
8-year-old girls in 10 seconds or less, which is amazing. Right. But yeah, I'm wondering whether at any point, I don't know, who are we going for here? Does the Chuck Todds of the world have to say, again, with the wall, you've shut down the government 5 times over this wall, and you keep reopening it saying you got the money. Why isn't it built?
Why isn't it built? And is that going to be enough for Republicans in Congress to rally behind to support him?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's a very good question.
I suppose it requires too much memory. Will people remember that we've already done this a couple of times? I think they'll have a vague sense of it.
I think lots of people, particularly Senate Republicans who are running for re-election, remember what happened in January.
Yeah.
And February.
Mm-hmm.
And how bad that was.
Yeah.
I don't think Trump's memory extends back that far.
No, I doubt it. And, he didn't care. So even if he does remember. But yeah, government employees certainly will remember, and people who were neighbors of government employees around here, where there was a high concentration of them, and we knew people who were like, yeah, I can't do anything. I'm going to food banks because I haven't been paid in weeks, and who knows whether I'm gonna get paid even if they start this thing up again. It was pretty traumatic.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Hope everybody's got a little bit put away, except I don't know how they would. So
how would they?
Yeah.
And because they haven't, have they been reimbursed for that? I don't remember, and I should
believe
know
that
that.
they have. But who knows whether that's going to happen again? And here you go, deep state. Here's how I feel about impeachment. You're not getting paid next time. I don't know.
Well, and it's the holiday season.
Yeah, everybody buys
Merry
a lot
Christmas,
of spaghetti. Okay.
So save all your money just in case there's another government shutdown.
Right.
But happy Christmas.
Right. Get used to ramen. Cheap and easy. Okay. Well, so we'll
None of which
keep
is
one eye on
normal,
that.
by the way.
No, doesn't happen this way. Not every year, one after the other. And remember that the last time out, there was the other abnormal part of it was there was open question about whether or not employees would be paid. Essential employees who had to come to work during the shutdown. Are you going to get paid for that time you're spending? And that's usually a guarantee. Oh, of course. Not this time. Not last time. So we'll see about this time.
Yeah.
What else?
But
I
then
guess
there's
that's
good news.
Probably okay.
The
I'll take some good
2020
stuff.
election starts next week, and it starts pretty much in your home state.
Ah, okay. Even though it's not 2020. But okay.
It's not 2020. It's almost 2020.
Yeah.
And we have the legislative.
Yes.
Well, we have all of
A lot of
Virginia state
elections.
elections, right?
County level elections as well. So
Not
yes,
the
some
governor.
municipal ones. No.
But the legislature.
Yes, so legislature all over. Plus, just as a reminder, as I said, county elections. So in Loudoun County, Julie Briskman, the woman on the bike who gave Trump the finger, running for county supervisor for the district his golf course is in. So heads up for everybody.
How's that going? How does that race look?
Looking pretty good. I don't know whether they really pull at that level or discuss polls at that level anyway. But she's hanging around and doing well and running a very credible campaign and is out door knocking everywhere, doing all the things that you need to do. And it's a blue trending area. I think it's as likely a possibility as any that she'll end up an elected official. Next Tuesday, right? Yeah. Okay.
Next
We're
Tuesday.
out of time
As
now.
likely as the House of Delegates and the Senate flipping to Democrats?
Perhaps more likely for her race, I would think, but we'll see. I mean, it's still a dicey
4 seats
proposition
away.
in Richmond.
We're 4 seats away from having the Virginia legislature in Democratic hands.
Yes. The prognosticators give it a good chance. Definitely. There's Rachel Bidikofer in particular becoming like Frederick Douglass. We're hearing more and more about her every day, and she's alive. So that's good news. Yeah, as, her predictions becoming famous across the country, and she's got a strong case for the argument that Democrats come away with controlling majorities in both. That would be great. We'll take it.
It would be
a huge
fantastic. It
indicator.
would terrify a lot of powers that be.
Mm-hmm.
The NRA being one of them. Headquartered in Virginia.
Yeah.
Its home state is Virginia, and it has poured a lot of money into these races, into propping up Republicans in those races.
Yes.
It would be really significant to beat the NRA there.
It would be great for a number of reasons, and that's an added bonus.
It would scare Republicans everywhere to have this flip. So this is an important one. If you have a few bucks to spare, do it this week. We've endorsed 6 candidates, so you could do it through Daily Kos. But they're also doing GOTV, both on the ground and virtual. So if you could make phone calls, there are lots of things that you can do to get involved to put the scare into Republicans ahead of 2020 in Virginia.
Right. Okay. So opening round of 2020 at the end of 2019. Used to just call them off-year elections.
It's a continuation of 2018. I mean, starting last year, really, with the midterm elections was the beginning of 2020. But this is a good standout point.
Yeah.
In the middle of
know what
impeachment,
year it is.
in the middle of government shutdowns, in the middle of a Trump meltdown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It will help set the tone for what we do starting next year.
Yep. Right. A lot of that data that is being generated about the legislative elections is that Greg was telling us the other day, a sampling of 4 key Senate districts where there were good toss-up or better races for Democrats, where the polling was that support, overt support for Trump was a big net negative for the Republican candidate. So, that's the point. We hope to be able to drive that message out of those elections next Tuesday.
And there are even some states where the Republican senator, states that are very Trump, or were very Trump in 2016, where the Republican senator isn't doing so well.
Yes.
Iowa with Joni Ernst.
Mm-hmm.
She's been far outraised by both the Democratic funds that like we've got set up for at Daily Kos. Iowa isn't one of our states, but all of these pledging places where you can pledge your money and pay your money into an escrow fund that will go to the Democratic nominee.
Maine, for instance, that's
and
the famous one.
to her opponent,
Which opponent? Are we
possible opponent, Democrat.
in Maine?
It's an Irish name.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
We'll get
I
it.
hate that.
We'll make sure everyone knows it. Are we talking about Maine?
We're talking about Iowa.
Iowa still, okay, because I switched to Maine because I knew we had a fund going there. So, okay, Ernst's possible opponent, huh? Okay. I don't know either offhand. Irish, though, you say? Okay.
It's a
Someone
woman.
will tell me. Yes.
Well, anyway.
Okay,
We don't
sorry.
know. We don't know. There are several Democratic candidates. She's the one who keeps popping up in my email.
Oh, all right.
She's the one who's raising the money.
There we go. That's how you do
We've
it.
seen Cory Gardner, Susan Collins. They're all being outraised by Democratic candidates. Susan Collins is relying more and more and more heavily on huge donors who do not live in Maine.
Yes.
Susan Collins is in trouble.
Yeah.
Which
We've been
breaks my
anticipating
heart.
that for a long time. Yeah, I know that would be. Well, I'm deeply concerned about it.
The big story out of Maine is the whole airport kerfuffle. Have you seen that one?
I haven't.
A couple of weeks
Bill.
ago, she was in the D.C. airport at Reagan National, and a liberal kind of guy, but a regular guy from Maine, a constituent, saw her there and asked if he could have a conversation with her about things.
Yes.
And she was not forthcoming.
Right. She
So,
complained a bit.
and then he heard her mention to another person standing in line as they were getting ready to board the plane that she thought he was very rude to her.
Yes, okay.
He does not recall being rude. He just asked her a few pointed questions about, do you think it's okay for a president to ask a foreign country for help getting dirt on a political opponent? Which seems like a valid question to ask a senator.
Absolutely.
Susan Collins said this was very rude. And the more this guy thought about it, the more, Eric Mercer is his name, the more upset he became. So he took out a full-page ad in I think the Portland Press Tribune saying, hey, this happened, and it shouldn't happen. The crux of the problem being that in over 20 years in the Senate, Susan Collins has not had a town meeting.
Really?
She will not open her doors to constituents to just come and have free-flowing discussion with her. She has not had a town hall meeting in 2 decades.
I thought they were all about town hall things.
They're in New England.
Yeah. My goodness. How unflinty
and
of
this
her.
is becoming sort of the flashpoint for what Mainers are trying to do. So he got so much support for that first ad, which Collins really came out hard against.
Yeah.
And now, the second ad he ran this weekend had 400 people signed on to it.
Wow.
So
she's continuing with this. Okay.
it's continuing. So this is very much a Maine-based opposition to Collins, and she's having to go out of state to get her support.
Okay. Well, not surprising that she would have to resort to out-of-state support, but that's great that he's continued on. He realizes he drew blood there, which is not rude necessarily. I mean, what can I tell you? She's a bleeder. It's not my problem. All right. Well, very interesting. I'm glad that continued. I do recall that now. I thought it might be. I didn't recall right away. Oh, airport kerfuffle. Oh, yes. Okay. Now I remember. Famous incident. So maybe that will be her undoing. We could do worse.
Brett Kavanaugh will be her undoing.
Oh, well, yes. I mean, her actual performance would be reason enough to vote against her. But kudos to this guy for, one, posing the questions, and two, focusing the attention on this. So,
all right.
Excellent.
For all your listeners, your assignment in the next week is to give money, give time, get out the vote in those places that we've got races.
Yeah. Knock, give people rides. Okay. All right. Hang on just a second. We'll say goodbye on the other side of the announcement here.
Bye.
You have been
Or right now.
to the Kagro in the morning show.
Makes it hard to hear.
With David Waldman.
Didn't mean to talk over the announcement, too, but it's not super important. What's super important is that we thank Joan for coming by and giving us her time. We appreciate it, as always, and that you stay tuned for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here on Netroots Radio, covering all the stories that even we, among the three of us, didn't get a chance to bring you next.